Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Frontier Beyond Fear Blog Talk Radio program. I'm Susan, Larison, Danz, welcoming you once again to another week of shows that I hope we will find are very much in the heart space, which is the intent of this show. And I am just so delighted to have you here today or whenever you are listening, as I know many of you listen in the future to the podcast. Today, in just a moment, I'm going to bring on the line a new guest to the show, Shavasti, who is a wonderful healer and teacher, so very much in touch with his own heart and the heart that connects us all. And he has some very honest, beautiful things to share from his new book, which is essentially the expression of his own journey, Embracing the Power of Truth, Tools for Liberating Your Heart. Now, Shavasti has also been known in his life as John L. Payne and wrote 4 inspirational books. He has facilitated literally hundreds of workshops throughout the world. And he has told me he's coming to the U.S. for the U.S. audiences this summer. He is an international authority on family constellations and ancestral healing. And he's really had a very diverse journey where he's explored energy medicine, shamanism, and various spiritual paths. And what is most important to convey at the outset about Shavasti is very much his authentic connection to the heart, which is at the heart of his journey. And he's had a number of profound experiences to help guide him to this place and to help us explore our own hearts. And you can learn more about Shavasti at shavasti.com, which I very much like to express right at the beginning of the broadcast and invite you to go there and explore, really with great joy, because I appreciate the soul of this person, Shavasti. It is with great joy that I bring him on the line right now. Welcome, Shavasti, to the program.
Yes, hi, good morning to you. Good morning, and thank you very much indeed for inviting me and for that introduction.
Well, I feel that no list of so often in these introductions we can list off all these various things, and yet truly, Shavasti, what you're about is the heart and helping us to better understand what truth is. I love how you explore that for us to help us to know.
Well, one of the things that I really looked at within myself, and one of the things I noticed with other people, is that we very often keep secret from ourselves that which we truly long for.
Yes.
Often when we get onto a path of spiritual development or even personal development, we're looking for some kind of improvement in our lives. Either we want to improve our health, or we want to have better relationships, or we want to be in an intimate relationship if we're not in an intimate relationship. So there's generally something that we're looking for that is fairly external, and there's nothing wrong with any of those things.
Yes.
But it's rare for individuals to state, what I'm really looking for is to know the truth of my heart.
Yes.
And to know actually what love is. So we have these traps, we have these ideas, and so one of them can be to be carrying a love mask, for example, to making it look all nice and shiny from the outside, which then bypasses the longing of the heart to know itself as love. And the reason why we can do those bypasses and sit in a lovely shiny love mask, as it were, because this becomes this image of what it is to be good or spiritual or wonderful or pleasant or even enlightened, is that in order to discover the depths of our heart, we need to also encounter the very thing that we have perhaps been running away from all of our life, or maybe even for many, many lifetimes. What is the one thing that we have been running from? And so it requires us to meet that, whatever that might be. Yeah. And it's often scary. We're afraid of it, because our deepest fear is that the thing that we've been running from might actually be true. One of the deeper truths about shame, for example, and we all carry shame, is that shame cannot survive being brought into the light of consciousness. So shame cannot survive being spoken about. It cannot survive being deeply felt either, because then we're bringing it into the light of our own consciousness, and hopefully there's going to be a witness there. We all require to have some kind of witness to our life.
Yes.
So someone there who can witness what is actually happening with us. That's part of a human social requirement. It's one of our needs, is for there to be some kind of witness to our lives, to give it some greater meaning. And so shame is so common to every single human being, but once it's brought into the light of consciousness, it begins to flounder, it begins to drown, and it just begins to die. And so it's no longer the thing that's keeping us prisoner. And so in order to discover the depths of our heart, it's not really about discovering the love that is there, although that's a big part of it. What is there is discovering the lie that we've believed in, that we are not love, or we are not lovable.
Yes.
And that my
Shavasti,
deepest longing.
So many of us have, perhaps as children, when we were such innocent children, and yet were taught things that caused us to embrace a belief, or even if we denied it, that caused us to believe that shame is essential, or that it's it's something. It gave us an unhealthy relationship with shame. And how do we return to the innocence of what you speak? I know you talk about innocence being at the core of this love.
For me, innocence is about realizing and surrendering to the love that is there.
Yes.
So, for example, perhaps you had a father who was violent, or perhaps you had a mother who was very critical or violent or abusive in some way. One of the things that we've done in our society, because a lot of our religious foundation is punitive in nature, that says that the bad are to be punished and the good will be rewarded. Mm-hmm. So we look at those who have harmed us in negative ways,
yes,
which is a very natural thing for us to do. But we're actually told we're not supposed to love them. So if our father beat us, or if our father sexually abused us, or if our father abandoned us, then we're not supposed to love him, because he's clearly a bad person for having done those things. And I'm not here to say that he's a good person, and I'm not here to say that you should forgive or love or whatever. I'm not here to say any of that, because none of that works.
Uh-huh.
But what I am here to say is, once we're given the permission or even the hope that it's possible to love those who hurt us, we actually discover that the innocent child that still lives within us actually loved our daddy.
Yeah.
Actually loved that aunt who did that, loved that brother who did that, loved that sister who did this.
Yeah.
So the love doesn't actually go anywhere. And acknowledging the love that exists doesn't let the other person off the hook. It's not about that.
Yes.
It's about realizing the authenticity of our own heart.
Yes. Now, I know, Shavasti, you speak of this notion of our wound and our wounding and how we can better understand our relationship with that within. And can you explore that for us, this notion of the wounds that we may carry with us, and how we can truly enter into the journey of healing?
First of all, when it comes to the wound, it has to be accepted that for the most part the wound is not going to go away. In fact, we don't really want the wound to go away. We don't want to be living from our wound, but we don't want it to disappear altogether. For example, one of the things that I say is that the pain of my childhood walks beside me as a friend, and it informs me of compassion. It informs me as to how to be compassionate. And so it is the relationship to our wound that changes. And so when I'm working with a person one-on-one, and I work with many people over the phone, over Skype, etc., not just in person, so it doesn't really matter where anybody is in the world.
Yes, anymore.
Is that one of the first things that I teach them, through presence, through becoming fully conscious of their wound and also the defense around it, is to help them realize that the defense around the wound is what is causing the dysfunction in their lives. It's what's causing relationships not to work, or their life not to work, or their career not to work, or to get in the way of health and wealth, etc.
Yes.
It is very natural for all human beings to want to have sufficient food on the table, sufficient money to spend on nurturing themselves, to have quality relationships in their lives. But many of us have interruptions in different areas of our lives. And so it is the relationship to the wound that I assist people to transform. And so first of all, the wound is unconscious, and therefore it's a burden. We just know that things are not working. We keep on meeting the same kind of people. We get the same kind of boss. We date the same kind of person. It's just all those people, those horrible people. Those people that piss you off all the time. It's just those people. And no matter where I go, those people just turn up. And it's our defensive reaction to them. And so we're not conscious yet. So that's when the wound is a burden, because it's running our lives, and we don't know yet that it's running our lives. Then the next stage, which can be the very challenging stage, is when the wound is our teacher. When we go, oh my goodness, there I was again. This is in the aftermath, so the 2 minutes after, or 1 minute after, or 1 day after, or 1 week after it, when we go, I'm not actually sure that person was saying that or doing that. That was just my reaction to that. There I go again. I meet this kind of person who reminds me of my mother, or who reminds me of my father, or reminds me of my brother or sister or first wife or first lover, etc. And I'm having this reaction again. But actually they didn't do anything, really, except to remind me of a situation. And I'm already going into defense. So that's when it's our teacher. And that can be the stage when we get really impatient and we want to fix it, we want to kill it, we want to drown it, we want to have it ripped out, we want to come to a healer like me and say, fix me, get it out of me.
And as quickly as possible.
Oh, as quickly as possible, yes.
Yes.
And
yes.
then the final stage is when the wound becomes our teacher. And as I said, the pain of my childhood walks beside me as a friend, guiding me through compassion. Guiding me through compassion. So that's when it becomes our companion, where we can be in conversation with someone and realize that our wound has just been stimulated or touched in some way, and we just breathe it, knowing that we don't have to go into defense. We don't have to react to that, but know that the person standing in front of us is not responsible for what happened to us 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. They're not responsible for that. And that in this moment, there's a moment where the wound is touched upon, and we're able then to see the other person and ourselves in that moment through the eyes of the heart.
Yes. How does the mind distract us from coming into an authentic awareness like that? Because it seems like what you describe actually involves, it's even logical. I mean, one could say that it's the mind, and yet it's really the heart, isn't it? Help us to understand the relationship between the two.
That's a very good question. I'm still in the process of understanding the difference between the two.
Yes.
Well, there are all these words that get bandied about within spiritual circles or circles of people who are expanding and growing into their own consciousness. And so the mind and also the ego can be seen as the great enemy. But they're not. And we need the mind. Logic has its place. But living from that place solely, only living from the mind, makes for a very dull and lonely existence.
Very empty.
And so the only way to live from the mind completely is to have all of your emotions suppressed. And we don't get to choose which emotion gets suppressed. And there are those people who have trained themselves to, let's say, never feel anger, or to never act out of anger, or certain feelings have been labeled as bad feelings, such as jealousy, such as bitterness, such as arrogance, etc. And so all of that becomes suppressed.
Yes.
However, if you really look at that, we need to ask ourselves, well, how's your joy doing? How is your joy doing? Because the emotional body within the auric field, it is liquid. It's like a river. And so when a beaver, as you have there in the Americas, as a beaver creates a dam, it doesn't say, well, I'm only going to take the central flow of the river. No, it just dams the whole thing.
Yep.
And so everything becomes dammed. In more ways than one. Not just a dam, but it becomes dammed.
Yes.
You're damned towards a life of numbness. And so one way to know where you are with that is to realize that the mind strategizes and has lots of opinions. Lots of opinions. And it loves to tell stories.
Yeah.
And it loves to tell stories. And so when I work with people, I work with facts. I say to them, okay, what happened in your family? And I preempt it by saying, but what I mean by what happened in your family, I would like to know, did your parents get divorced? How many children were there? How many brothers and sisters did you have? Were there any specific events such as were you in hospital? Did you lose a sibling, etc.? I want to know about the factual events. 9 times out of 10, in answering that question, I don't really get to hear that much about what actually happened. I get to hear all the stories. Well, my mother was like this. She was a bit of a gossip. And my father drank a bit, and he was this kind of person because he had that kind of relationship with his mom and dad, and then da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So we get all the stories that we formed and all the opinions and etc. And none of that really helps us. None of it really helps us at all. The mind likes to do that and piece things together. The heart has no opinions.
Yes.
It simply looks at what is.
You know, something I find interesting, Shavasti, as you're talking about this is any of us who have had any kind of counseling, and I have in my life, sometimes, and especially traditional type of counseling, we seem to be taught to analyze these things sometimes. And of course, certain fields of psychology will really go into that kind of analysis, and so we somehow associate those things, those stronger, explanations with the truth, and yet perhaps we need to unlearn some of those things to get to the core of the matter, to get to the real heart.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'll give you a classic answer that I'm given at times by people. They'll say things like, well, yes, of course I understand that my father was an alcoholic, and I know that he was doing the best. I know that he loved me.
Uh-huh.
And that's a story that someone can tell, particularly if they've been in therapy, and particularly if they've read some self-help books. What they're not saying is, I still feel this deep well of shame, but I'm going to use my mind to tell a better story about it, because the pain of the shame is far too much for me. Then they become afraid of it, because somehow going into this feeling of shame becomes equated with being disloyal to their father now. This now means I'm going to uncover some horrible feeling, maybe hatred towards my father, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to create this story that says, yeah, he was doing the best that he could. And whilst that is true, when we create that story in order to avoid dealing with our deeper feelings, that's when the trouble starts. And that's because there's a lack of understanding of what the heart is truly capable of. There's a belief that if you were to dive into your shame and then to come across your own hatred, be that hatred of your father or hatred of yourself, and the two of them normally exist together, then there's a belief that you are now doing something bad. But if only we have the courage, if only someone can hold our hands so that we can surrender into that fully, and I'm really talking about surrendering into the hatred and into the shame fully, then what we will discover is a deep and profound love for ourselves and also for our Father. And when we discover that, the word forgiveness ceases to have any meaning, because it doesn't have to be tried. It is instantaneous when you fall into that space. And so we no longer need to tell the story that has been created to avoid the depths of our own shame and self-hatred.
Yes.
And that's why we create those stories.
I have a question for you, Shavasti, and I'm not quite sure how to ask it, and I'll do the best I can. It's a question of the heart. Is so often I feel like with one another, for example, in what one might loosely call the spiritual community, which I use very loosely, is that there can tend to be this glossing over, and I really feel that you are capturing how we're denying ourselves in a way, even in relationship to one another. And sometimes there will even be lecturing, and I'm trying to say this in a way that's not judgmental. I'm trying to stand outside of that, and yet I have to be honest, within my own self, I feel a little bit of, I feel upset a little about some of this, that that we can't be honestly ourselves and real. You know, if we're having a real experience that today is not such a good day or whatever, and then immediately we're told, well, you know, set your intent. You know, what's that affirmation? Or you know, and we even repeat it ourselves. I do it on my Facebook page. I put out affirmations to me to help me feel better. And again, it's going to be kind of a long question because I'm going to try to express this best I can. It's not that deep down I just know that there is some peace in these things. I mean, this is the thing. And I feel you get at it. It's not that we can't get closer to awakening or, you know, I be careful not to use terms that you use in a way that I'll let you define them in the way you do, but I feel the peace that time. I mean, I can feel my own progress, and I'm happy about that. I can feel that I'm a more peaceful person, and yet I don't want to be in denial of the core feelings at the center. And when I'm with other people, I want to be with other people. I don't want to feel like they're suppressing what's at the core, it's at the heart, and I don't want to be suppressing it. And I guess most of all, being with myself. I mean, because you're talking about coming into relationship with ourselves. And I'm going to make this an even longer question just by saying, you know, I had an experience even this past week, and this has been a very emotional year for me. That just makes it a very interesting year to do this show. And sometimes it comes out, sometimes it doesn't. A lot of times it does. And I'm happy about that. But, I mean, I can have in a single walk in the forest, like I did this last weekend, feeling like I want to weep, and then feeling an amazing joy at the center. And I'm not in denial when that happens. There truly is both. And so I hope, as best I can, that kind of captures something that I know is at a core of your teaching, and you can help us with this.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that we've seen happening in spiritual communities is that there's a belief that if you are awakened to one extent or another, then life will only be good.
Yes.
That emotions will only be the pleasant emotions, and that is just simply not true. It is simply not true. There is a time and a season for everything. There's a time for mourning. There's a time for weeping. There is, at times, a time for righteous indignation.
Yeah.
There's a time for joy. There's a time for laughter. There's a time for play. And very often, those individuals who disallow authentic feelings from other individuals, those people who have no tolerance for negative feelings.
Yes.
So there is a kind of an abuse that takes place within these spiritual circles. As soon as you express something negative, somebody says, "Oh, but look on the right side," or use this information. Well, don't you know that? You know, the universe is here to support you, and that is because there is an avoidance of their own pain.
Yes.
I used to do this myself in the 90s. It was just the way that I was. That everything needed to have positive affirmation, positive outlook. And so I have written articles in my blog. I've got a blog of mine on my website, Shavasti.com, where I talk about addiction to positive thinking, the positive thinking trap. It can become abusive. And I myself have ended friendships based on this.
Yes.
Based on this. I remember when my mother had somebody who had attended some of my workshops, but we'd also developed a friendship, came round and said to me, "I don't understand why you're crying. All people know that she's in a better place." And I looked at her and I said, "My mother's just died. How are you expecting me to respond?" And she was disappointed that I was feeling grief, as if somehow my own level of spiritual awakening would have lifted me above such an emotion.
Yes.
And I said to her, "I would be more concerned if I were you, if I were not weeping in this moment."
Yes.
But then it became a very unpleasant conversation, and the friendship right there on the spot. And we did speak one time after that, and she was still holding on to that place and still trying to tell me how I should feel. And so that happened, sadly. So it's all there. It's about how we navigate it. Meaning, are we wallowing in self-pity, or are we just in the moment experiencing a moment of grief? I talk about the profound grief in my book.
Yes.
And the profound grief is real. We live on a planet on which the ghastliest of nightmares are lived out every single day.
Yes.
Where millions of children are going to bed hungry. Where millions of women are being raped and mutilated.
Yes.
This happens on a daily basis on our planet, where we send young men off the war to die for what? To die for what? And that is something to be sad about. However, the human experience is very broad, and so many go to spiritual path because they want to be anchored to their own pain. They don't want to feel pain anymore. They want to feel good all the time, and there's this idea that somehow part of this is that you are only going to feel good. But I'll ask you this. If everyone's striving for oneness, let's say, that's a word that's bandied about, well, what does that mean?
Yes.
If you're one with everything, then you are at one with war. You're at one with the misogyny on the planet. You're at one with the misandry on the planet. You're at one with all the abuse on the planet. But you're also at one with the beauty of creation.
Yes.
There's a time for celebration, and there's a time for weeping.
Yes.
And so those who are chasing the light rather than surrendering into the light of the heart and the truth of the heart often have this big shadow stuff. And my invitation is to say, just stop for a moment.
Yes.
I invite you to look at what are the ideas of goodness that you have. Because if you are running at such high speed towards the light, and if you are not allowing anyone else around you to experience or to express anything negative, then I invite you to stop. Just stop for a moment and realize that you are not as bad and as ugly as you are afraid that you might be.
Yes.
That's why we run towards the light, because we believe that what's inside must be despicable and ugly. If we have courage to stop, just stop.
Yes.
And breathe, and allow someone else to hold us as we surrender into the truth of our being, instead of reaching, grasping some image of how we think we should be. That's the problem here. Many on the spiritual path have been gathering new images of what this looks like.
Yes.
So, perhaps came out one image that said, I'm supposed to have a mortgage of this value, a car of this value, a job of this kind of salary, etc.
Yes.
The other status symbols to a whole new set. And so now we're mainstream spiritual is we've got this new set of images of engaging, and these images are far more than these other terrible, horrible, materialistic ones. And end up with both, actually. And what I tell people is, what's happened there is that we've replaced one set of images with a new spiritual set of images. And now it's through because we're running from something.
Yes,
and so my
we're
word
running.
is an invitation. It's an invitation. It's an invitation not to point a finger at you, not to tell you off, to say, what I've discovered here is that this chasing of the light simply creates more suffering. It creates more separation. And so it's an invitation to do less and to surrender. And of course, in order to surrender, there must be a degree of trust. And so we can build up a relationship with a teacher, build up a relationship to ourselves of trust. Once we know or get a glimpse of that which is inside us is not evil, it's not bad. In our culture, it's been raised with the idea of original sin, that we were all born a problem that needs to be solved, that we were born bad.
Yes, it's that. Many of us were taught that way. I certainly was taught that. Shavasti, occasionally you're fading out just a little bit. I just wanted to invite you to speak a little louder if you can, because sometimes the connection is fading a little.
Okay.
Which is an irony in a way, because I think that sometimes you speak of the separation that we feel, and you know, I'd like to explore that, and as how, you know, our feeling these gaps that seem to widen sometimes when we're in denial, or the separation between us and God that we were taught. When you speak of original sin, I mean, that's exactly what many of us were taught. That, and yet this separation, however you define it, I know can feel very real, and part of our journey is exploring that.
The separation takes place in very early childhood. And when we look at young children, they come in and they are the light. A young baby can light up an entire room with its smile, with its giggle, with its gurgle. And as children, it is our natural state to love everyone and everything. We might just see a young child that's fascinated with the sun, with the frog, or with anyone who comes into the household, runs up and grabs hold of an uncle's leg, and just loves everything. What is very clear is that we have to be taught how to be racist. We have to be taught how to be sexist. We have to be taught to be afraid of certain people, and we have to be taught to judge certain people. All of that behavior is taught us. The child comes into this world being sexist or racist or ageist or homophobic. Children don't do that. Adults teach children how to become that. And so already the essence of the child, which is true love, is what we're going to use is suppressed, it's denied, it's told bad. And so when we get this message that we're not supposed to love that kind of person, or like that kind of person, or trust this kind of person, already we're receiving the message that there's something wrong with our love. There's something wrong with it. It's not safe, it's not natural, etc. So all of the things, all of the isms, the sexism, the racism, etc., has to be taught. That is not natural to us. We take that on. On top of that, many of our parents and grandparents, because of their own life experiences, and those life experiences can be ones of absolute genuine hardship, if they have lived through in war or more than one war, or lived through the Great Depression, some kinds of hardship and some kinds of loss, is that we then become worn by this and by that. And so our life becomes snuffed out. It becomes cropped, it becomes snipped.
Yes.
And so we're told things like, oh, nobody ever made a good living as an artist. I'll give up on that dream. Become a dancer, sweetheart. No, your ankles, they're not strong enough to become a dancer. Oh, nobody could ever make a decent living as a dancer or an artist. Well, why would you want to do that? Your father worked as a banker, your grandfather worked there. Go for a solid career. Get something that's going to be paying your mortgage for the next 50 years. And so dreams and aspirations become snuffed out. And then we start the self-sabotaging as we grow up as well. But they are sabotaged in very early childhood. And as we think about this, these people are evil or bad. They're doing what they believe is safe. And so first we get told who to love, and that tells us there's something wrong with our love. And then our dream begins to be suppressed. And we know, and I'm sure you've met people like that, and there's an element of that in your own life, I'm sure, that when we look at those people who are risen to the top of what it is they do, so let's bring it right down. I think, for example, of people like Nelson Mandela. If I think of someone like Oprah Winfrey, and countless people across the planet who made it despite all of the odds. That everything was against them, and they were able to connect with something inside that said, don't give up. This is the essence of who I am. This is the truth of who I am. And they refused to give in to all of those who said, you can't do this. The world is not like this. And so this is where the separation takes place. And it is a source of enormous pain.
Yes.
Source of enormous pain. So every time our life has been pruned, stuffed out, exceeded, every time that someone has said, you can't, you shouldn't, it's bad, it's wrong, we hold that as an energy within us. In fact, it can be seen in the auric field. So we have this central column of energy that rises out of the body called the Shushumna. And this is where our divine light flows through there. And that chi, that energy, that feeds also the chakras, and chakras and energy from the universe around us. But wherever we hold this place of I'm not allowed, I'm bad, it's bad to be loved, it's not safe to be loved, we hold this energy. And in this place, this is the place of separation. And it's terrifying when we feel it. It's a different kind of void. It is a deep sense of numbness. It is a deep sense of separation from the truth of who we are. But we can learn to open that up again through encountering the wound. And the great wound is the huge disappointment. Huge disappointment. The love that we had as a child was not enough to save our parents, or to save our family, or to rescue them from this place of darkness where they've been living, where their dreams are smaller. And I'm using strong words here, and I'm not using these strong words to suggest that these are terribly dark families we've all been born into. We can all have pretty good relationships with these people who participated in the living of their own life, and therefore our life as their child. But it is devastating to us, and this devastation is not felt and suppressed. That's the place of separation. that's the place where, like Jesus cried out, Father, Father, why have thou forsaken me?
Yes, yes.
We feel the deep separation, the abandonment by God. It isn't truly the abandonment by God. It is the separation from the truth of our own heart. And of course, who resides in the depths of our very own heart? It is God. And so that expression, I actually don't know who said this. I'm a little bit embarrassed. I don't know who said this wonderful quote. I think I touched myself and I found God. And I went and stood God and found myself. The two are inextricably. I say to people, if you love God but do not love people, then you have missed the point entirely. However, if you love people and do not love God, then you will never see them for who they truly are. Because in the depths of the heart, the truth of the heart, that is the divine. And so the abandonment that we feel, the separation that we feel from the divine, is simply separation from the truth of our own heart. And the truth of our own heart is not an image that can be chased. It's something that needs to be surrendered to. And what we encounter on the way, of that surrender is everything that has told us apart from that bad, and that somehow we have fallen short in some way. It is painful for us not to love everybody. And when I talk about it's only game that we play. So something I discovered in my life, the it's only game. I used to play the game of saying, oh, it's only my taxi driver. It's only my hairdresser. It's only my cleaner. It's only the lady who works behind the checkout.
Yes.
Because we've grown up in a culture, society that says that love is only for very specific people.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have love for someone, then there has to be some other meaning given to the relationship. Either you're friends, or they're a lover, or they're a husband, or a wife, or a partner in some way. And so we give love all of these meanings, trying to push it into these boxes. And I realized one day that I was saying this only game. I had a regular driver, a taxi driver, that would always pick me up at the airport. I'd always use the taxi driver all the time. And one day he did something that hurt me. And it hurt my feelings. And I went inside my house and I thought, why am I upset? It's only the taxi driver. And I tried to talk myself out to hurt the feeling.
Yes.
Then I realized I love this man. I love his wife, I love his children. I love this man. I had a relationship with him. We were friends. And I was trying to deny the love that existed by saying, oh, it's only your taxi driver, get over it. And I realized, oh my God, this is how I'm running my whole life.
Yeah.
And I decided from that moment never to play the it's only game again. And I realized that there was a big lie that I told myself. I told myself that if I loved someone, then there had to be a particular kind of relationship. We had minimum had to be friends. And I realized, guess what? That's not true.
Yes.
That's not true. And so there's a great feeling in the heart. And there's a great longing in the heart, because that's the truth of who we are, is to love everybody. And you know what? If I'm not in that space, I'm not in that space.
Yes.
There's nothing worse than carrying a love mask. When we take gestures that we can all make of expressing a smile towards somebody when that's not what they're feeling. And that can happen in supermarkets. Somebody says, "Hi, how are you?" "Fine." "Fine." It's almost the same. And so by then, we become more authentic, and give yourselves permission to love as children. Because that's what we long for. That's what we long for more than anything.
Yes, it's that authenticity. It's just, that there's that simplicity, and yet it eludes us, which is interesting. Is it's so simple, and yet it still eludes us. That we find our way back there if we surrender. I love how it's that notion of surrender is so core to what you speak of, Shavasti. And we're afraid of surrender, I think. And yet children, when they just give themselves up to abandonment in their joy and their love. And I'll tell, I was in the forest and I observed a tree that fell over the weekend, which makes me very sad because it's in an area that I love and its canopy is gone. And I watched this child exploring the jagged trunk of the tree, and she was just in total joy and curiosity, and that's the forest. Trees fall, and yet it impacted me because I walk there often, and there was something there, Shavasti, just that experience, and also seeing the child, and I know that it's related to today that I had this experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, the tree has become something else. It's not becoming a tree, but its function has become something else. And the wonderful thing when a tree falls in the forest, if you go back there a year later or 2 years later, there's going to be moss growing all over it and all sorts of mushrooms growing on around it. So its whole function changes, and it gives of itself very freely to that function.
Yes.
So back to what I was saying of surrender and discovering what is there, one of the things that we are afraid of is our vulnerability.
Yes.
And so vulnerability, especially because there's so many generations of wars and terrible things that have happened over so many generations, the vulnerability has been seen as a weakness. And so we must soldier on, as it were, be strong and carry on through life. And in past generations, that's just how people lived.
Yes.
They were moving from one tragedy to the next. And so it became learned over many generations to feel and to survive. And so the very word surrender feels threatening to many people. And that's why we gather in groups. That's why we go to teachers. That's why we see those who are offering satsang. That's why we see those who have developed processes and techniques for surrendering into the heart. That's why we take teachers. That's why I've had teachers over the years. Many teachers over the years. I still have a teacher. It's possible working with so many clients privately, and have my own teacher to go to. Because when did the exploration stop? It doesn't. The depths of the heart contains many caves and caverns that need to be explored. Some of them are beautiful, and some of them are not quite so beautiful when we enter them. There's always a diamond there. There's always a diamond there to be discovered. It is in the depths. It is truly, this is what I want people to understand. It is through positive affirmation. It is not through chasing the light that we become enlightened. It is in the depths of our wound. It is truly in the depths of our wound that we discover our magnificence. It's in the depths of our wound that the greatest part of ourselves is waiting for us to surrender to. It's in the depths of our wound that our greatest gifts are uncovered and going to manifest. We came forth into this world to make manifest the truth of who we are. And the truth of who we are is not some image of what it is to be spiritual. The truth of who we are lies underneath all of the lies we've told ourselves about us. And this is not a job for dreams. Positive affirmations are okay, but not the solution. Because what happens is that's like a band-aid on top of the gaping wound. And with us, we want to avoid pain at all costs. Do anything to avoid pain. And that's why we live in a culture, Western culture, Western developed nations, industrial nations. So we're talking about the nations of the European Union, Australia, the United States, Canada, all the developed nations. We have become a numb society, and we're finding increasingly different ways to numb ourselves out. So we've got all the smartphones, we've got all the television, we've got all the shopping, we've got the credit cards, and none of this is speaking against having all these material things. It's how we're using them. Yeah. And we're using them to numb ourselves out. Yeah. And that's why we have these images of what goodness is and what light is, because we've decided that it's so terrible that we don't want to feel what's there. And we've made vulnerability. And we've made vulnerability into something to be afraid of.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we're nearing the end of the program, and I so appreciate how, what you're saying. It tells us to be present, because we want to escape that, it seems, and I really appreciate the honesty that you're bringing into the world here. You're just sharing your own heart with whoever might listen. I mean, it doesn't matter how many. I mean, it's just, I so appreciate that, Shavasti. And I wish I could talk to you even longer.
I'll be happy to come back to the show anytime if you would dedicate this next week.
Oh, I would so enjoy that. And I want to remind the listeners that your website is Shavasti.com, and also give you the opportunity to let people know when you'll be in the U.S., since we do have many U.S. listeners here, or anything else you have coming up.
I plan to be in the United States during the months of June and July. So I am open to receiving invitations down in different groups. Of course, no matter where you are in the world, I work on Skype and phone with individuals. So if you go to the website, Shavasti.com, Shavasti.com, you can get in contact with me that way. And of course, my book is available on Amazon.com, Embracing the Power of Truth. I almost forgot the title of my own book there. Embracing the Power of Truth. It's just been released, 2-3 weeks ago on Amazon.com. It still smells of fresh ink. And of course, if you want a Kindle version, if you prefer pixels to print, then that can also be got on Amazon.com as well.
Well, thank you so much. And there is a link to the Amazon page that we have on the show page. So I invite people to explore, because you have a powerful journey, which we haven't even begun to talk about. And before the live show goes down, and then I want to give you my final thank you here, I just want to let the listeners know that the next show is Wednesday, April 15th, 7 p.m. Pacific, with Robbie Holtz, who's going to talk about Aboriginal Secrets of Awakening. So that'll be a very interesting show after this one. And I now want to, again, just give you my, from my heart, Shavasti, thank you so much. And we're going into the podcast now. Thank you, live audience, for being here. But just a sincere thank you. And I feel that we've only brushed the surface. Something you say at the very beginning of your book, it's meant to be explored. And it's something that you want to spend time with. And I want to invite the listeners to do this. This is not all in a rush, this kind of work. Either exploring your book or exploring just the the ideas that come from it, from the heart. And so thank you so much again from my heart.
You're welcome. Welcome. Thank you very much indeed for inviting me into this space. It's always a pleasure. And everyone say deepening surrender to the truth of who we are. That's very much indeed. Thank you. We must say.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So take care, Shavasti, and I do appreciate your being here today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care. Just a note to those of you listening, I know that we're talking to the podcast audience now, which many of you do listen to the show this way, the vast majority. I appreciate you across the bounds of time. Let me say that to those who are listening in the future. You've been present with us in this time, and I want to recognize that. And for those of you who are listening in the future, you know that to find this show, FrontierBeyondFear.com has all of the archive and all the future shows and the past you can find on that site, as well as the link to iTunes. I'm noticing more and more people are discovering the show on iTunes, and I'm very thankful for that, too, because that's an area I haven't emphasized a lot, and I'm happy that people are discovering it there. So once again, the next show, Wednesday, April 15th, 2015, because I know some people are listening years in the past to the archive, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, Robbie Holtz, Aboriginal Secrets of Awakening. And I once again invite you to explore today's guest's website, Shavasti.com, and you'll find the link there on the show page. So thank you, everyone, for being here. May you really take these things to heart and take your time with it. This show is not going to, these teachings, this exploration of truth, I feel it in myself. It is a journey, and let's just acknowledge that together, our own journeys into the space of the heart. Take care, everyone.